Welcome to the Illicit Feminine Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Marth, and I am so excited and honored to be joined by Rachel Jackson. Rachel is a business energetics coach, and I have had the pleasure of working with Rachel for the last few years. She has been my business energetics coach, my business coach, spiritual and personal energetics coach, my mentor around energy. I can't say enough about this woman and her wisdom and just her gift with energy and helping people, me specifically, as I'll speak for myself, really develop my own awareness and healing and depth and processes around energy. Also, Rachel is a author of the international best-selling book, Becoming Unstoppable, as well as the podcast and the Becoming Unstoppable cards. There's just a abundance of things that Rachel has to offer. So welcome, Rachel. I am so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm very happy to have you. So why don't we start with the question that we always start with, and then we see where the conversation goes. And I know it will flow exactly how it's meant to. But Rachel, share with us, where in your story did you feel that there was an unraveling, that there was a point where you knew something wasn't right and you needed it to be different?
Yeah, there was a few points that came up throughout my life, and a lot of them were work related. I always stumbled across different roles in leadership, lots of different things that I did. And I would always get to a point where things would start to crumble. So I would be on a massive high and things were going great, and then everything would start to crumble around me. So I'd either get a boss that I didn't like, or something would happen in my personal life. Just something would knock me off track, because at that time I was putting everything into my external career. I thought everything was external. So it was all about having more money, a bigger house, a better job. It was always striving. So I kept coming across these areas of my life where things would be going so well, and then things would just all break down. And it was a cycle that I was constantly going through. And it was due to me constantly looking outside of myself for something. And when I had my kind of pinnacle moment, things were falling down at work. I was unhappy in my job. I was unhappy in my relationship, but I didn't really know at that point how unhappy I was. We had a family bereavement that hit really quite hard as well. That was a suicide. And at that point, I felt really trapped and I needed something for me. So I started going to a spiritual development class and learning more about meditation and healing and lots of different things. And that opened an absolute catalyst for change in my life. Everything unraveled from that point, really. And it was the first time I really started to look inside of myself for what I needed and where my life was going. And it opened up a whole new avenue that I didn't even see coming. I did not imagine what my life would look like. And if anybody's heard my story before, I do say I watched The Secret, and it was like a lightning bolt hit me. Something just opened up and I see myself stood on a stage. And there was just so many things that changed at that point because I started to look inside of me rather than outside. And that was huge.
I think it's really important because I believe and see that so many people are conditioned to live externally. I lived that way for so much of my life until really started the work, probably like really understanding. I think I've always been in some sort of personal development, right? Like those of us who are on our journey, we're on the journey like from a young age. But really after the death of my mom was when I began to really look inward, because I had looked externally. So when you're sharing that you began to really look inside you, it can sound, well, of course, for those of us who are in it, but I think there's such a distinction when you are looking for life externally and when you begin to really look inside and understand that we're the source of absolutely everything because of that source energy, God, the divine, however you want to define it. So I'd love to just take a moment and really, what did that mean to you? Like on a deep, dark level? Because was it all rainbows and sunshine? Was it some darkness and shadows? What was going on for you at that point?
It definitely wasn't all rainbows and sunshine. I was so far in the to me consciousness, and probably had been most of my life, even though I was successful and I'd really made something of myself. I got there through struggle. It was always a push. And I was constantly in the to me consciousness of thinking everything was happening to me. People were doing things to me, or I give away so much power and control. Yeah. And it wasn't until I started looking at that and doing the mindset work. And I'd always done mindset work, but that connection between you could control your reality versus it happens to you, that hadn't happened yet. It took me to be in probably one of my darkest places, where I felt at that point really alone. I would say I was married and so alone, and I had a big family and still felt very much alone. I always had a big circle of friends, but I was so guarded in that I was the one who would always be there for others. And it got to the point, obviously, we went through that family bereavement. And I remember at that point, I would walk into my family's house and the first question they would ask me is, how's Carl? And that was my family. And it was like I just didn't exist in people's eyes. I was always secondary. And it just really hit home that actually there's something disconnected, and it was me not putting myself first or even asking myself what made me happy. And that was a big eye-opener, but also heartbreaking to go through. You have all those people around you, you have all that support network that you think should be there. But unfortunately, if you're the type of person that doesn't ask for help or seems self-assured that they don't need it, you don't get that support. And that was really a lesson for me, that how do I give myself that love, because it wasn't coming externally. And how do I be there for myself and really look into putting myself first. And that was a really tough decision, to start to put my own happiness first, and really to stand up in front of my family and say that as well. That caused its own issues. So it definitely wasn't sunshines and rainbows, but choosing to put yourself first is really the only option any of us have. We're not here to live anybody else's life path, and we're not here to waste this lifetime neither. It's a question of not will you do it, it's when.
So you're in this place, there's been this bereavement, you're understanding that you're going to choose yourself, you're going to love yourself. What is happening? Like, you've mentioned your husband. What choices are you making at this point? What are the changes that because you've come to this truth, right? Like, what is a truth that we call, or I call, like this illicit truth, meaning it's maybe not something that we initially think we should have. It's not something maybe we try to ignore it, or we try to hide it for a little bit, or we feel shame around it. So what are some of the changes that you made when this truth, like this feeling inside of you choosing you loving you, what are the choices that you're making? What is it looking externally?
Yeah. Externally for me, so it was a journey since the grief part. So there was the bereavement, and then there was a period of things. There was light and dark in those moments. So if I look back, me and my husband had problems before that happened, and that put a bit of a band-aid over it. And so there was an element of us getting closer, but there was an element of us being more detached as well. Those two handle grief in very different ways. Spirituality and my intuition saw things differently. So there was an element of us growing apart, but there was that element of us being there for each other as well, more me being there for him. We'd spent years of tackling different issues, and him not being in a steady job, or things being issues with money. And we've been through a lot of stuff. For me, internally over time, what I started to see was I wasn't in that place. So the amount of challenges we'd been through, I wasn't in a space to go, all right, now you've sorted that out, we can just be okay. Because I'd been through quite a lot by that point. And even though I was moving forward in my own career and things, I was always having to support and bring him up and do things that was draining on me. And it started to come to the point where I could see that this level of me saying I was happy, it wasn't real. None of it was real. It was me being fine. When I looked under the surface, when I could see what I was accepting, there was a level of pattern of behavior that I would accept. Something would happen, there'd be a trigger, he'd do something, and then he'd apologize and we were okay. And then it was just this cycle of behavior all the time that I'd accepted for so long. So when you do start to turn it inward, what happened externally was me really stopping nurturing him. So what it really allowed me to do was to start to coach him in a sense, which I maybe should have done earlier. But instead of taking on all those problems, it was right, okay, how are you going to deal with that? And it was always, I was able to put that boundary up in place. And I give him the choice by doing that, whether I was challenging myself to vibrate at a higher state, and he had a choice whether to meet me there or not. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to meet me there. And once I realised that and accepted that that was fine, because there's going to be someone perfect for him exactly as he is. And it isn't for me to change him to what I need, but it's for me to release that and let him go and find who he needed to find and me find who I needed to find. So it was a case of really being brutally honest with myself around what I had facilitated, what I had accepted, and was I willing to continue to accept that? And the answer was no. In a short space of time, really, it seemed like this decision period for me went over about a few months. And I thought, wow, that's quick. Something just flicked in me. It was like I was done. But actually, when you look back, it was probably a 3-4 year period of things not being good, and a lot of me settling or choosing to live a way that I didn't really want to live. So acknowledging that myself was huge, huge.
Absolutely. I'm going to go back for a minute because you said something that I think is absolute truth, and yet I think it can be a really controversial truth. And then I want to move forward in your healing path. But I'm going to go back. You said something, and I didn't understand it until I started to do conscious uncoupling work, because I had been like on a personal growth journey. But when I started to do conscious uncoupling work, when I was getting my certification, and I was just learning it, right? Like I was just super fascinated. Part of it was to do with personal things, but then my mom had died. So I was like working the program kind of with my mother as well. You said it wasn't that he needed to change for me. There was someone who could meet him where he was at. And so often, again, I think there is a mass conditioning that there's a belief that other people need to change for us so that we can be happy. And truly, when you look at that, I mean, we're taught that even like with boundaries, like a lot of times we'll set boundaries so that we get it mixed up, I think. Yeah. We're setting boundaries, but the boundaries are for ourselves. But we expect other people to meet those boundaries so then I'm happy and comfortable. So then I don't have to change, but I want you to change. So I'd like you to share just a little like thought on that, because I do think this is a big thing where it gets messed up.
Yeah, boundaries are huge. And to be honest, that was a mass part of me making the decision to leave. I finally realized that a lot of my like processing in the marriage, a lot of the way I communicated, a lot of the way I operated was based on his potential. And it was probably based on potential from the very beginning. And one of my gifts as an energy healer, as an intuitive coach, is I do see people's threads. So I'm able to see people's timeline above the one that they're living in, which makes me an amazing coach for an entrepreneur, but it's not a tool that you should be using when you're picking your future husband. So for me, I always based it on potential. I seen what he was able to do. And he fed this at the beginning. So he was in that journey and gonna do all these amazing things. But the problem is it was all talk and it never actually appeared or showed up in his life. And I kept using this level of potential and hoping that he was going to get there or hoping things would change. And when things did get better, they still weren't better at the level that I hoped they were going to be at. And it was constant where I did think, I wish you would do this, I wish you would do that. So thinking of like the manifestation process, that was all happening. And the universe was taking note and saying exactly what was on my wish list, but it wasn't for him to fulfill it. So there was a lot of things that were on there, and I had to take a step back and stop trying to change him or morph him into what I needed, and really be honest with the fact that he isn't the one who can deliver that for me. And that was, as soon as I said he was perfect as he was and I didn't need to change him, that then changed my trajectory, because I had to go, am I okay with keeping him as he is now or not? And that was the big realization once I was able to accept. It wasn't about him crossing my boundaries. It wasn't about me not communicating. It was about us just being at different frequencies, not being aligned in that way. And some people aren't going to be on your journey forever. So it's when you get to that point, you've got to be okay with stepping away. And that was the hardest thing for me. And I did cling on for a long time, and I communicated my boundaries. I used to say I get more attention outside of the marriage than I get from you, and I made some poor choices on that. I never had full-blown affairs or anything, but there was definitely times where I was crossing a line myself because I was desperately unhappy and craving something more, craving some attention. And if we'd have continued, it would have spiraled to something really dark. And I'm lucky that we did break off for a time where we were able to be quite mutually okay about it. But I know not everybody gets to that point. But I used to say, I'm happy, but I could be happier. I knew I could be happier. And actually, once I broke away and did more healing, I've looked back and seen that was not happiness. I didn't even know what happiness was at that stage. And we're talking, I was 35 and I didn't know what happiness was. And that's sad, really. It was the hardest but best decision, hands down, I've ever made in my life. And with everything that comes after it, all the guilt, all the shame, I would take it again and again because I would still make that decision. 100% the best thing I ever did.
Okay, so then here's my next question. You just shared, you obviously experienced some guilt, some shame, some different stuff. How did that get you, come with you, transform, however you want to say this, into your healing? Because I think sometimes the guilt and the shame can feel so overwhelming, regardless of the situation. It doesn't have to be a romantic marital situation or anything like that. One of my beliefs is that our gold is in our guilt and our shame. That when, like, our guilt and our shame is there really to catapult us to the next place, and like we can learn and grow from it. So how did your guilt and shame help you on your healing path?
So that period where I felt guilt and shame actually helped me spot where I'd been bringing it in from the past. So I didn't expect to feel guilt or shame when I got divorced. There was no part of me that felt bad about getting the divorce. I felt it was fully the right decision. I felt a little bit of, oh, I've let him down because I was nurturing him for so long. But there was no part of me that really had, any Catholic guilt or anything like that. And yet that started to come through. And especially when I got divorced, and the email come through, and it was an email to say we were divorced. And that really infuriated me, because I was like, I have had years of having to go through this divorce process, and to send me an email, it just felt so small, and it didn't really encompass what I'd been through, that I didn't really know I was going to face. But I think the word divorce and the female guilt and shame that comes with that, it wasn't mine, but it was there. It really was there. And what I found was it opened me up to what I'd felt guilty and shame about lots of different things in my life. I still felt guilty about hurting my first boyfriend when I was 19. I was holding on to that. I was feeling guilty. There was a lot of guilt when we were younger. When I was younger, I was molested as a child, and there was someone else in my family that was at the time. And there was a lot of pressure put on me that I didn't have it as bad as that person, or because I dealt with it in a different way, they didn't feel I had it as bad. And there was a lot of pressure and a lot of guilt put on me for that. That was all storing. So when all of the release happened, it allowed me to go back and heal not just this timeline, but previous timelines, anything that had come up in the past, anything that had come up in a past life. It really allowed me to release that guilt and shame for like lots of different things that had happened. And it was a freeing process, and probably one that I needed to do that I hadn't realized I needed to do. So it brought up lots of different instances where you're just holding on to that. And it's like an anchor that holds you down, and there's just guilt and shame leaves no purpose. There's no reason to hold on to it. So if anybody is, please work on letting it go, because it doesn't serve you in any way.
So you are beginning a new life. What does that look like?
For me, it was quite different. Like I said, the universe had been manifesting. I had been manifesting whilst with my husband. And I didn't realise that someone who got me through a lot of the hard times in my relationship and within the work scenario, I worked with someone, and they were a good friend for about 3 years. And actually, once we were coming to the end of my marriage and he was coming out of his relationship, we started to see each other very differently. So for me, I moved on pretty quickly due to the fact that, one, this relationship had formed along that period, and two, it was like the universe has said, yeah, you can have all of these things that you've been wishing for, but it's in this package, not in this one. So for me, it was really different, because I went from being a wife, living with someone, to being a girlfriend in separate houses. And that was a really strange environment. I started a new job as a full-time coach and started my business. So everything really took off in a whole different way, and I had to learn a new way of living. I had to learn a lot of new boundaries and a lot of things about myself. And I was lucky that Mike, my partner, was able to show me things. So we were both pretty guarded when we first got together. There was a lot of communication we had to work through, a lot of boundaries we had to work through. And even just if he asked me what I wanted for tea, I couldn't answer him. I would say, "What do you want?" And even just that realization, he was like, "Will you just answer my question? What do you want?" Was a huge realization for me, that I hadn't asked myself that for so long. Even though I knew I'd broken off from the relationship, it wasn't a case of asking what I wanted. It was asking what I couldn't live with. It wasn't a case of what do I want in this. It was still just, I can't accept that anymore. So to start asking myself, what do I really want, was huge. And to have someone to show you that in your face was a bit daunting, really.
I think that's can be one of the most challenging questions for women in the shadow work modality that I work within. The first question is, what do you want? and you said this so beautifully, we're so clear often on what we don't want. Now, sometimes we're not, right? And in manifesting, right, in the steps of manifesting, it's really important to know what we don't want, because it's the contrast. What we don't want shows us what we do want. But a lot of times people will get stuck at the what I don't want stage. It doesn't go beyond, what do I want? And so that question can feel really overwhelming at times, because especially I'm gonna stereotype this. I do think that as women are taught, what does everybody else want? It's not what you want, it doesn't matter, but it is what everybody else wants is more important than what you want. And so you're a good person if you put what you want at the bottom of the list, and you're meeting everybody else's wants and everybody else's needs. And if you're meeting what you want, you can be selfish. And it's backwards. It's when you actually understand what you do want, and like from a aligned place, it changes your world. So just the fact that you're even saying this. So Mike's asking you, well, and it seems simple, right? Like, Rachel, what do you want for dinner? But it's huge. Yeah. So is another catalyst into you like really being like, fuck, what do I want? You knew it to a degree because you've been manifesting it, but this is like on a deeper level.
As women, we're not taught to ask for what we want, and we are taught to be nurturers and put everybody else first. We're given dolls and prams and kitchens and whatever else from toys, and if we're playing with something more macho, it's, what's going on. It really is poured into us that that's what you should want. You should want a family, you should want a husband, you should want that life, and that entails you putting everybody else first. And so to be able to ask for what you want is not something natural that's going to come naturally unless we start talking about it more and getting it out there. Now, even when you are saying what you don't want, this is where people worry, are they going to manifest the right things? The universe is pretty clever. You are sending rockets of desires when you are saying what you don't want. So please do not worry. But the difference is, are you ready to receive what you do want? Now, if you're constantly saying what you don't want and staying in a situation that you don't want, then you're telling the universe that's okay and you're willing to accept it. So it's not going to change a lot of energy around you whilst you're doing that. But to be able to have someone relay to you that you can't answer that simple question was a huge part of my healing. And it allowed me to say, why do I do that? Why can't I just own what I do want? So now when I catch myself doing it, because still sometimes you'll slip into that.
Can you give us an example, Rachel? Because I think for our listeners, an example would be amazing, because I think this is common.
The best one is, what do you want for dinner? Sometimes even just little things like you're planning a holiday or you're planning a trip. How often do you plan that around your husband or the other people that you're going with, and you end up somewhere that you really don't want to go? Or you do things that, you're doing things to please someone else, but you don't want to be at a certain event. So one of my podcast guests said about the 7 out of 10 rule. She lives her life by, if it's not a 7 out of 10, she doesn't do it. So if her and her husband are asked to go somewhere and they're like, do you want to go? If it's not a 7 out of 10, they do not show up. And how much do you go to events or help somebody out or do something that you just don't want to do? And we do it over and over, but we're not honest with ourselves that actually I don't want to do that. And the worst thing is, women do that in all aspects of their life. And the scariest bit is they do it in their sexual relationships. They do it in any part of the relationship. But that's the bit that scares me the most, when they make themselves feel uncomfortable to make someone else feel comfortable.
I think that is it's like this negative superpower that women have. And I've done this so much of my life. And women that I work with, women that I know, I think this is taught, maybe even without words. Women make themselves uncomfortable so that other people can feel more comfortable. It's like this self-abandoning and self-avoiding and neglecting. And it absolutely happens sexually in the bedroom. more often than not, I know more women who are unhappy in their sexual relationships and their marriages than I know women who are actually happy. And it can be as something as simple as, do you want to go to this party? Is it a 7 out of 10? But the other part that I think that comes up out of this, it's just important to touch on for a moment, is that when we're doing things we don't want to do, and as your expertise being in energy, and so much of really anything that I know about energy really has come from Rachel, like to the depths of where I have gone to learn about energy. She's been so amazing. But when we're showing up where we don't want to be, our words can be saying one thing, but our energy is absolutely saying another. So it doesn't actually benefit other people. Like we live so much of our life, and I say this because I did, like it's a play. I want people to see me a certain way, or I think we do this out of respect, or we do things, and I get it. Culturally, socially, religiously, there's all these things that we grew up and we were taught, and all of these things. But at the end of the day, we're living at a time when disease, depression, anxiety, all these things are like absolutely rampant. And there's not this connection. People aren't getting this connection between like, where are you really living? And believe me, I am not living completely authentically or in 100% alignment. I work on this every day. And it shows up physically, Rachel knows this, in my body when I'm not. Like my body rages when I am not being in my truth.
Yeah.
So this is a really important conversation to have about what are your desires and how much of your life are you doing things that you don't want to do, because it's actually not serving you, nor is it serving the people around you.
Yeah. And my body is exactly the same. So I have endometriosis and fibroids, and my body screams at me when I ignore it. When I am stressed, when I'm saying yes to things I don't want to do, when I'm putting everybody else first, I have the most crippling period. It really does scream at me, because I'm not brilliant at accepting it just yet for myself. Your most important asset is you and your body. And if you are out of alignment or you are over giving, something is not going to last. And you will be that family member that is ill. I ended up watching my mum have illness as soon as she retired, and spent probably 10 to 15 years of her life before she passed suffering the results of severe burnout. So she was burnt out at work, she retired, and then everything hit. She got diabetes, she really struggled with walking. In the end, she had a stroke. And I look at her now and I think that is not going to be me. Those lessons and patterns that have flown through my family, I cannot repeat them. Even at the moment, my dad's going through a bit of ill health, and I'm probably his comfort blanket with my mum passing.
Yeah.
And he's putting a lot on me and trying to use me in that way that he would have spoken to my mum, or the dynamics they would have had. And I've had to take a step back and actually look at things and be like, I divorced my husband from those patterns of behaviours.
Yeah.
I'm not choosing to have it again now from my father. So I have to now manage that relationship in a way that's right for me. Even though I've got to be there and support him through his ill health, I am the priority. Because I could put everything aside and go, yeah, you treat me that way and you do that, and I could go backwards in that sense. But that's only going to project for me into the future, into what I don't want. So absolutely. I need to choose today that I change that dynamics of that relationship as well, because that isn't continuing with me.
No. And I think this is where we do get these choices. We may not recognize them as choices unless like you're aware of energetic work or doing the energetic and emotional work. But there's something that Abraham Hicks says, and it just resonated so much with me. You can never be sick enough to make somebody better. You can never like be sorry enough to make somebody better. And you said this at the beginning, we're all on our own journey. I'm responsible for my energy. I'm responsible for my journey. You are responsible for your energy. You are responsible for your journey. Your dad is responsible for his energy. And I say, my mom was responsible for her energy. I cannot make somebody better.
Yeah.
I can do my part in what I'm being called or led to do, but we can't make anybody better. They have a responsibility. And thank God, because that's where then we have our power, they have their power.
Yeah. That was the biggest lesson for me when I started tapping into my spiritual journey. So when I look back, I've always been extremely intuitive, but I probably only started tapping into it when I was about 35. And I would go to different healings and learn about different modalities, and there would be all sorts of classes I would be going to. And I would try and get my mum to come to them, knowing that she could help herself, she could do the healing, she could do the mindset work. And it was constant, oh, my mum would really enjoy this, my mum would really enjoy this, I should get her there. And I noticed that I'd spent most of my time when I was meant to be learning for me, thinking of her and how to get her there or how to get her to start doing this. And she wasn't interested. And that was the hardest thing for me to be okay with, that I can't heal her, can't heal anyone who doesn't want to be healed. And I had to let that go. For whatever reason, she chose to give up, in a sense. And I just had to take, what lesson was that for me? Yeah. It wasn't a case of how can I change her again? It was, how do I just accept what she's choosing and release the energy around it so it wasn't holding me back?
Yeah. And I do think that is one of the most powerful lessons that we are here to learn. For me, that's been one of the most challenging, to see myself separate from that person, to let them have their own feelings and make their own choices and face whatever comes with that. I have someone in my life with whom I'm walking through that now, and it is a constant reminder and a constant growth for me. The beauty of that is to know that they are divine. Like, they have the light in them, whether they are connected to it or not. They are that person, and to see them as their highest version and not try to save them. They are capable of saving themselves. And I know that can be a controversial statement in and of itself, with mental illness and different things that go on. But at the heart of any of it, there is still truth in it.
Yeah, and I think it made me realize that you can't use anybody's trauma as an excuse for how they're showing up. So throughout my family, we would always have a story. There'd always be a sob story. So my grandma would treat my granddad like an absolute prince, but he had a really rough childhood. He wasn't supported, he wasn't looked after, he didn't get his meals made, and his mum died at a young age, and he had to look after his brother and sisters. And this was the story my grandma kept telling. At this time, my grandma was probably 65. I'm like, he's lived with you for 40 years. I think he's been okay. But this story was still going on. My dad lost his mum when he was 2.5. So again, he didn't really have that family upbringing that we had. So let's make excuses for his behaviour. I did the same with Carl. Carl had a pretty rough upbringing with getting bullied at school. So I put his lack of confidence or lack of doing things down to that. But when you look, I don't think I've met a person that's ever not had trauma. And so we can't keep accepting people's trauma or people's past as an excuse for the behaviour that they're showing you. All you can take on is what you're seeing. And if it's not in alignment with what your truth is, then you need to choose to distance yourself regardless of their trauma. There isn't any one of us that hasn't been through something. And how you deal with it and how you move on is really up to you. But that doesn't mean that everybody needs everything from you because you can emphasize with their trauma. Women tend to do, and especially women healers do a lot. There's a difference between emphasizing and letting things slide or letting your boundaries slide when it comes to certain people and relationships. If you want to heal someone, you've got to detach from that story and see
Yeah,
how they're operating.
absolutely. I think that this comes so perfectly back around to the first part of our conversation as we're coming to a close. When we actually begin to understand what loving ourselves feels like and what it looks like, and choosing ourselves feels like, and understanding what it is that we want, like knowing ourselves, I call it becoming self centered, that shifts, making it okay for other people. There is something that when we have so much love for ourselves, and we can have so much love for that other person, right? Seeing them as whole, even if they aren't, even if what they're showing us isn't. No, they can be. This is where I think your gift of seeing above the timelines comes in. But that doesn't mean it's your or our responsibility to get them there. But when we have that love and know our boundaries, like for ourselves, and are in that alignment, and okay, I slip in and out of this, so this is not something I have mastered, but I can feel the difference. And I can also feel, because it's at that point I'm letting them be who they are. And you've said this to me and other people that I respect. Sometimes you just have to let whatever they're doing burn around them, or whatever it's going to do. And I do believe when we are in that love for ourselves, which again, women are not taught how
No.
to love ourselves. And I think it's one of the most important things. And it comes back to what you were saying, choosing you and loving you and learning you and what it is that you want.
Yeah, and I think the thing where we think we're given a kindness, so where we think we're being really kind to them, being there for them, we're actually being unkind.
Yeah.
Because we are blocking their growth.
Yeah.
So for me, with my husband for years, because I would sort everything and help him and deal with everything, he never had to learn to do anything. And he didn't really grow until we were apart because he didn't need to grow with me. So I was giving him a real unkindness by being there and doing everything, and also holding myself back massively. Where we think we are being kind, it's really not, because other people need to let things, sometimes everything needs to burn down around them so that they can get the lesson that they were meant to get and be better for it. Because if anybody's had any form of trauma or any form of upset, I bet you've come out 10 times stronger off the back of it than what you ever were.
And I think that's another thing that we have to get out there, like that we have to help people to understand. We're taught in school, in church, in wherever social circles to give, like it's an overgive, right? It's not just a give, like it's an overgive. It's an enabling. It is a codependent energy with other people. And even Jesus in the Bible, right? Teach a man to fish. Don't give it to him. Teach a man to fish.
Yeah.
We get this so screwed up. It's kinder to let somebody figure out who they are. That's all of our journeys.
Yeah. And you just brought up a reminder. If anybody's a Friends fan out there, thinking of when Joey challenges Phoebe to find a selfless good deed, it really is that, because we're probably feeding ourselves more than we're feeding the other person. We're feeding the monster within us, the part of us that really isn't serving us as well. I did a workshop today with 50 women, and one of the questions I asked was, think of a time where you've held yourself back from something, and it might have been a speaking opportunity or it might have been leadership or something. And everyone in that room wrote something down. And when you think of that, there's 50 people in that room and everyone has held themselves back from something at some point. How sad's that?
Rachel, that's such a great way to finish up really our conversation. Like, so you've asked that question. Is there anything else you'd like the listeners to percolate, to think on? What, if that's the question, what else would you say around that?
The big thing for me is, if you feel you're holding yourself back in any way, just ask yourself why. Is it that you're trying to facilitate others' happiness, or is it a belief in yourself? And I think that question helps you with whatever way you need to heal. Because if it's a belief about yourself and your ability or your confidence or whatever it is, that's fixable. And also if it's a belief about putting somebody else first or someone else's happiness first, again, that's fixable. But you have to be honest with what you're doing there and why you're doing it.
I love this. Rachel, I can't thank you enough for being here. And I have so many more questions that I want to ask. And so hopefully we can do this again.
Love that.
I'll have all of Rachel's links in the show notes. But Rachel, people can find you for your videos and different things on TikTok, Instagram, your podcast.
Yeah. All out there. I'll give you the website so that you can put that on, but it's just racheljackson.uk, so you can find everything there.
Rachel's book, Becoming Unstoppable, which is amazing. And it's so powerful, and yet it's easy to read and understand. Rachel, thank you so much. And thank you for listening to the Illicit Feminine Podcast. And we'll be back again soon. Take care.